On the second date, we went to a concert. That's because my dating coach, Sandy, had told me it's a good idea to do things besides coffee and dinner if you want to form a deeper connection where attraction can grow. I was very emotionally and physically closed off at that point. We had driven separately to the concert. He wanted me to drive to his house and Uber with him, but since it was only the second time I was meeting him, I wanted an escape route, so I drove myself. This episode is brought to you by Amazon Music Unlimited. You can listen to over 70 million songs and thousands of playlists and stations. Plus, you can now stream your favorite podcasts, like Last First Date Radio. You can listen to any song, anytime, anywhere, on any of your devices. Get Amazon Music Unlimited for free for 30 days. Just head on over to getamazonmusic.com/last-first-date to learn more and claim this offer. This is episode number 629, and I'm doing a solo episode today. I wanted to share one of the stories from my new book, Love at Last. It just came out in September of 2024. I'm super excited about sharing this because this is a story of a couple. I worked with the woman and I officiated her wedding just a week ago. The book is called Love at Last, True Stories of Falling in Love Later in Life. And the reason I wrote this book is because I saw so many people giving up hope that they would ever find love again. And Cara and CJ were a couple just like that. And I wanted to restore hope that there is a way. And it's not just about luck. It requires some skills, and these stories are all inspirational. And the first story in the book, chapter 1, is Cara and CJ, the ice cube that finally thawed. Cara hired me after a therapist told her the reason she wasn't attracted to the men she dated after divorce was because she was probably asexual. She was devastated, but we both knew there were other reasons for a lack of attraction. After working together for a few months, she met CJ. She would not have gone past the first date had it not been for the work she did with me to overcome the blocks that had been in the way. She called herself an ice cube that finally thawed as her attraction began to grow after a few dates. Here is their love story. Cara's own words. I just turned 42 and CJ is 43. We met a year and a half ago on Bumble, a dating app. A couple of days after we began texting on the app, we spoke on the phone and we ended up going out to dinner that night. That could have been our last date. After being married for about 13 years, I went through a 3-year-long, very nasty divorce. There was a lot of yelling, putting each other down, ultimatums, walking on eggshells, and anger issues that have been going on for over a decade. Throughout my marriage, I just thought that most couples fight, so I guess that is fairly normal. I had no idea what a healthy relationship looked or felt like. After the divorce, my ex-husband had moved on and found someone else pretty quickly, but I was not enjoying dating. I just wasn't attracted to anyone I met. I wondered what was wrong with me. I remembered crying to my therapist, "Why am I not attracted to any man I date?" She said, "You might just be asexual." And I wondered, could that be true? I cried. I was sad. And then I got angry. I wasn't going to accept that diagnosis. And that's when I started reading a lot of self-help books and listening to podcasts. Instead of continuing with therapy, I started dating coaching with you because it was time to work with a dating expert to figure out how to find someone I was attracted to. When I began working with you, I was like an ice cube, shut down, unable to fully feel and express my feelings. I needed to thaw out a little bit. You helped me understand myself better. You uncovered my dating blind spots and patterns and helped me figure out what was getting in the way of finding love. You encouraged me not to judge somebody after one date and not to expect immediate sparks. You encouraged me to go on at least 2 or 3 dates if there was some connection before moving on. You also encouraged me to do other things on dates besides just coffee, dinner, or drinks, activities that could lead to higher levels of attraction. I was going to try to force myself to go on some second dates, mostly so I could prove my dating coach was wrong. When I met CJ, our first date went well. We had a good time. I always had a good time on first dates, but as usual, I didn't feel the spark. I was going to ghost him after the first date like I did after all the other first dates, but he played a little game with me, and I was up for the challenge. He wanted me to guess what CJ stood for. He bet me a second date if I could not guess, and so I played the game. He has a very difficult name. I couldn't guess it. I don't think anyone he's ever dated guessed it. I wasn't that excited about going on a second date, but I thought, I've made a commitment, and since I can't guess what his initials stand for, I'll go out with him again. On the second date, we went to a concert. That's because my dating coach, Sandy, had told me it's a good idea to do things besides coffee and dinner if you want to form a deeper connection where attraction can grow. I was very emotionally and physically closed off at that point. We had driven separately to the concert. He wanted me to drive to his house and Uber with him, but since it was only the second time I was meeting him, I wanted an escape route, so I drove myself. At the concert, he wanted to hold my hand. He was being a gentleman, but I recoiled. I thought, is he touching me? After we sat down, he asked, "Are you looking for a relationship?" And I thought, what is wrong with this dude? We're only on our second date. He's trying to hold my hand like we're a couple. He's trying to talk to me about relationships. I didn't know how to respond, so I said nothing. After the concert, I drove him home because I felt bad making him take an Uber. He wanted me to come in, and we joked that the tire tracks are still in the yard of his house. That's how fast I sped off. I was so relieved to get away from him. I called my mom the next day and said, I'm not seeing him again. He's acting like we're a couple and he's moving too fast. And she said, so just tell him he's moving too fast. I said, whatever, fine. I could indulge my mother. The next day, I told CJ he was moving too fast for me. I said, I've been through a bad divorce and I'm just getting back out there, so I need to move slowly. And he said, I understand. Anything worth having takes time and hard work. I thought it was a cheesy line he probably used on all the women he dated. But I also liked that he wasn't pressuring me to be in a relationship with him. We went on a lunch date and then we scheduled a fourth date. I wanted to plan that date. But since I run my own business and I'm a single parent, I'm used to taking charge and being in control. So I wanted to plan this date, but I was really busy with work and life. So he finally said, do you want me to just plan something? That felt amazing for me because not only was he sensitive about my stress levels, he stepped up and asked if he could plan it. He planned a really wonderful date, dinner reservations at a nice Italian restaurant. Before he picked me up, he asked what my favorite flower was. I thought, great, he's going to show up with a dozen roses because my favorite flowers are roses. How predictable. He surprised me with cupcakes in a tin that had flowers on top. He said, I didn't want you to freak out if I bought a bouquet of roses, so I got you this. It was so sweet. On the way to the date, he said, can I hold your hand? Or are you going to try to jump out of my car? I laughed. We held hands. I still wasn't feeling sparks, but I was thawing. I liked the effort he was making. A for effort. We had a delicious meal and a few glasses of wine. At the end of the date, he walked me to his car to take me home. He kissed me, and whatever was left of the ice cube inside me melted. After that, I was all in. It moved pretty quickly. It had taken so long to get to that point. I guess I just needed to loosen up a little bit and trust his intentions. During my divorce, my ex kept referring to me as the ice queen because I showed very little emotion. That's why it's so funny to me that the ice cube thawed and melted with CJ. took me about 6 months to stop looking for the other shoe to drop. He had to earn my trust. I told him, I'm sorry you're paying for another man's mistakes, because I had been told no one is ever going to love me again. He was very patient and reassuring. I shared with him early on why my marriage had broken up. I wanted to be transparent, and he said, thank you for telling me, but I'm not interested in Cara from 3 years ago. I'm interested in Cara today, the person you are now. And that meant so much to me. He shared with me early on that he had been ghosted by a girl he'd been talking to on the dating app and was planning to meet before he met me. After we had been on a few dates, she texted him again. We weren't exclusive yet, but we both had felt a connection by then. She asked if he wanted to grab dinner, and he said, thanks, but no thanks. I've met someone else. When he told me that, I was touched. First, because he responded to her with kindness. Most guys wouldn't have responded at all. Second, he told me about it, which is how I began to trust him. I had told myself the same thing most women probably tell themselves. Who's going to want me? I have 2 kids. I'll probably meet someone when they're out of the house. Who is going to love me and my kids and want to take this on? I was wrong. He and my daughter bonded almost immediately. She asked him to coach her flag football team, and he's now the coach for our team. But it wasn't always so easy. One of our first fights was at a party. I had been drinking. I had done something, I don't remember what it was, and he reprimanded me. I was mad at him for doing that. We were coming home from the party, and I was harping on what happened, repeating myself, getting louder and louder the whole way home. It was something I used to do with my ex-husband because I never felt like I was heard. He wasn't yelling. He was actually very quiet. When we got back to my house, I was still upset. He said, we're not making any headway tonight. This way of talking is not healthy. I'm going to go home and I'll call you in the morning. I hardly slept that night. I was very anxious. It reminded me of my ex-husband, who used to leave during fights and sometimes go to a hotel and not tell me where he was. I would get so upset. I often had work appointments that I would have to scramble to reschedule because of childcare needs. This is what I was used to during fights, and I hated it. CJ's ex-wife would scream at him. That's why he shies away from confrontation. He would remove himself from the situation. We had very different ways of dealing with conflict. When I woke up the next morning at 6 a.m., I had calmed down a bit. I texted, I miss you. And he texted back, I miss you too. What do you want from Starbucks? I texted, how about a latte? And a few minutes later, he was at my door with 2 lattes. He said, let's talk about what happened. I couldn't believe it. He showed up with coffee and wanted to talk about what happened to work out things calmly. When I coached with you, Sandy, about it and said it was amazing, you told me this is what people in healthy relationships do. My experience with arguing was there was a lot of yelling and never any apologies. Everything was left unresolved and just swept under the rug. That led to years of resentment. On the way home from the cruise where CJ proposed to me, he said, I think we should talk to a therapist and work through how we resolve conflict. I don't want to go into a second marriage with issues. We started therapy and it's been amazing. About 7 months into our relationship, he moved in with me. His lease was up and it just felt like the timing was right. We had a lot of communication about it, discussed all of our concerns, and it's been really great. He and his dog moved in with me, my 2 kids, and our 2 dogs. Now his 21-year-old daughter lives in town, and that added a whole new layer to our relationship. It's good that we're in therapy. If I hadn't spent the time working on myself first, and that includes listening to your podcast and working with you, Sandy, I wouldn't have had this relationship. The communication class that I took with you helped so much. I don't remember exactly how to phrase every single conversation perfectly, but I'm a heck of a lot better at communicating than I was before that class. I sat up in bed one night a few months before we got engaged, and I asked CJ, how many girls have you played that name game with? I can't be the first. He said, you were. No, I wasn't. And you're the last, he said. As long as I'm the last, it worked on me, but it almost didn't. I'm glad I pushed through all my fears and we're getting married. And in case you're wondering, CJ's full name is Camille Joseph. Cara never would have guessed it, and neither would I. At the end of every chapter, I share the love lessons learned from every couple. Here are Cara's love lessons. Don't judge somebody after first date. That was Sandy's advice. You might not feel attraction right away. That was new for me. Sandy told me not to go in assessing whether you want a relationship with them, but just see if you're having a good time and want to see them again. Number 2, attraction can grow. I didn't realize that attraction could grow because I had always been attracted to a guy from the start. Number 3, take time to be single and work on yourself. I'm really glad I took the time to work on myself after my divorce before dating. When you jump into a relationship too soon, you're not learning anything. You're probably picking the same type of person and repeating the same types of issues. Number 4, learn to fight fair. Be aware of the baggage from your past relationships and don't repeat the same mistakes. Be conscious of your patterns and communicate them to the other person. That's hard to do when you're angry or upset. The time out strategy you taught me was really helpful. Saying, I need a time out to cool down, prevented us from saying things we might have regretted. Number 5, let the small stuff go. I used to get upset when I had a long day and he didn't wash the dishes. Now I ask myself, is that worth a huge screaming fight? No, let it go. Number 6, focus on the positives. I try to focus on the positives, especially when I'm upset with him. Number 7, don't give up hope. I used to think to myself, who will ever want me and my children and this messy life that I have? I also thought I'd never be attracted to anyone, and my therapist had suggested I was asexual. Working with Sandy on my limiting beliefs was so helpful in restoring hope that my person was out there, and I'm so glad I found him. That's the end of chapter 1. And so you see each chapter shares one of these inspirational stories of someone who found love later in life. She's one of the younger people who found love. We have people up into their late 70s. And people who found love after loss, people who found love after never having love in their lives and falling in love for the first time in their 50s and 60s and beyond. So I hope that this story inspired you and that you go out and get the book on Amazon. It's called Love at Last, True Stories of Falling in Love Later in Life. Thank you so much for listening. And if you love our show, please give us a high rating on Apple Podcasts and share this podcast with everyone you know. It's available on Spotify, on Amazon Podcasts, on every single podcast platform out there. So follow us, share us, and I hope you go on your last first date. If you are ready to get unstuck, gain new tools, become more empowered, and finally find your last first date, I'd love to talk to you. Fill out an application to be considered for a complimentary half-hour love breakthrough session at lastfirstdate.com/application.